Back in 2018, I was a student at Purdue University in an aviation major. For one of my classes regarding large aircraft systems and power plants, we were put into groups and each group had to present an aircraft to the class. Most of these were aircraft that had been released already, like the 737 MAX or the Airbus Neos, but my group was assigned the Comac C919, a Chinese-built airliner that was still a couple years away from release. Flash forward 5 years later, and I'm now in China to fly on the first ever Comac C919 in real life. Welcome to Chengdu, China at Tianfu Airport, where we'll be flying up to Shanghai on this brand new airplane. Interestingly enough, they don't fly the Comac into the main Chengdu airport, but rather into the brand new one. Tianfu Airport is only a couple years old, opening for operations in late June 2021. It's so new that Apple and Google Maps still struggle a bit to find it. I actually stayed the night prior at one of the two airport hotels. The Joy Hub Hotel is the main on-airport hotel and is separated into a nicer and a cheaper one. Since the airport is brand new, so is the hotel. It was wonderful with multiple restaurant options and brand new rooms, but most importantly directly connected to walking tunnels to each of the two terminals at Tianfu Airport. Terminal 1, where we're out of today, is the domestic terminal, while Terminal 2 is for international travel. We head from the hotel through the tunnels to Terminal 1. In addition to the hotel, the train and parking garages are also attached to this central hallway that also has some food options like Starbucks and noodles. Tianfu Airport, as previously mentioned, is the smaller of two airports in the Chengdu area, being just southeast of the city. It's a hub for Air China, Lucky Air, Sichuan Airlines, and China Eastern, which is where we're flying today. Interestingly enough, the other Chengdu airport also plays hub for these airlines, with the main difference being that the other airport has many more international destinations and has about 10 times the amount of travelers. The government did state that they hope Tianfu Airport will be able to handle just shy of 100 million passengers annually, but it currently only holds about 4 million. They have boards in the check-in area so you can find where to check in for your specific airline. And for airlines like China Eastern, it also includes where to go for economy class check-in and business class check-in. The H-Wing will be ours for check-in today, where China Eastern has a few rows for business class passengers to check in. Check-in was easy, and from there I took my boarding pass and went off to the specific security check for passengers traveling in first and business class. Because of the priority lanes for business class check-in and security, it only took me about 10 minutes to check in and get through security before I was out into the terminal. The first thing you'll see when you get through security is one of the lounges for the airport. It's not the lounge for us, as Sichuan Airlines and China Eastern have their own lounges. You will see a sign next to the door with the airlines that do have a home at that lounge. In addition to, right next to the screen with all the flights, there's another sign pointing you towards all the lounges, and on the back of my boarding pass is a stamp telling me to go to gate 214 for my lounge. So in the meantime, I guess we're headed off to gate 214. Once we get there, just past the Sichuan Airlines lounge, we come across the China Eastern lounge. As it turns out, 10 a.m. is a fairly calm time of the day for this lounge, since it did eventually start to fill up later on, but at this part of the day, it was almost completely empty. As with everything in the airport, since it's new, the lounge is also new, and it looks as such. The design of the lounge is gorgeous with tons of lighting, both natural light and lights from other sources. There's also so much seating that there was extra seats the whole time I was in here, and it's designed so well that all of the seating area is extremely private in each spot. The ambiance is incredible with the different colors they chose, as well as the accent pieces like the fountain, the bamboo walls, and the bookshelves in the back. As far as the food goes, there's a couple places where you can find stuff. First off, embedded in the seating areas, there's a counter mostly for coffee and tea, but also includes little tea cookies and crackers. They also have a large refrigerator for cold drinks on the other side of the room. If you're looking for a more substantial food, they do have a buffet and noodle station in the back of the lounge. The buffet starts with fruits and juices. Around the corner on the counter, we see the buffet, although for a couple hours they were switching from breakfast to lunch. As you can see here, there's plenty of open spots where you usually would find the normal lunch or breakfast buffet. There is a sign listed above where you can see that breakfast goes until 9, and then you've got a couple hour break until lunch is served, where they're busy cooking and setting up the next meal. The highlight of the food in most China Eastern lounges, however, is the noodle bar. The noodles were amazing and all made fresh. Essentially, there were 4 choices of bases which came with different sauces, meats, and spices. After that, you take your bowl down to the counter where they have a topping bar. Here you can choose which toppings you want to add, things like peanuts, chilies, garlic, yellow onion, spring onion, and cilantro. I ordered one of the noodle bowls, although it was all in Chinese, and rather than translate it, I just pointed at a random one and asked for it. With the added toppings, it was one of the best things I have ever eaten in an airport lounge. After that, I decided to go explore the terminal of this brand new airport. On first impressions, I am loving the amount of windows. Their air conditioning bill must be through the roof, but it creates so much natural light and views of the airport and surrounding areas that is at least worth it to me. They have plenty of places to sit and relax, not all of them at a gate. They do a good job of installing lounging areas in all the spaces between gates without making it feel overcrowded, but maybe that's because they're still only at a little over 4% of what the government's goal is for passengers per year at this airport. Perhaps the airport's best feature is its outdoor areas. They have a few since the terminal's in a funny shape. You can see here in this picture all those little openings in the roof. Because of this, the first one we see is an outdoor courtyard that's completely open air, but enclosed between the terminal walls. It has plenty of seating areas for people to relax and even has what seems like a stage of some sorts. Although looking at adverts of the airport, it seems that it might be used for Tai Chi or other group activities for people waiting for their flight. There was also an insane amount of people smoking in the courtyard all around. The whole courtyard had the scent of cigarette smoke. Interestingly enough, there is a smoker's room, but it was completely full, so people just found whatever space they could find and smoked there. As we reached the end of the terminal, where there were currently 3 flights to Wuhan departing, we turn around and walk back down the corridor. As mentioned, from pretty much any spot in the terminal, you can take a moment to look out the window and have a view of the ramp and large airplanes. Since China is still one of the slower countries at COVID recovery, a lot of their long-haul fleet is being used on domestic routes. So even though this is only the domestic terminal, there are still plenty of wide bodies. But yeah, for example, just between Shanghai and Guangzhou, which I also flew between on this trip, there's about 20 to 25 wide bodies per day, even though it's less than a 2-hour flight. For contrast, between San Francisco and New York, a 6-hour domestic flight in the United States, there's only about 6 to 8 per day. Back towards the middle of the terminal, we come across this section vaulted up above the rest of the terminal, so naturally, we had to go exploring. This is the area where passengers pop out after clearing security for those not using the first or business class specific security. There are a few restaurants up here, but it's mostly just a way to help passengers figure out where to go, since it serves as a central hub of sorts for the domestic terminal. From up here, however, we do have a good view of yet another courtyard, so we will have to add that to our pre-flight to-do list. And this is basically just the United States corner, since it had most people sitting at a Starbucks or across the way at the KFC. As you can see, however, passengers come out here from security and the escalator goes down to the main rotunda. There's a sign up here with all the flights and gates, and then down at the bottom you can see all of the labels for which direction takes you to which gates, including gates that appeared to require a train to get to, although I didn't need that today. Now off to that main courtyard we saw from above. They have these amazing magnetic doors that make it so you don't have an actual door, but it still magnets shut in order to keep the outside world outside, and especially the air conditioning inside, which is important on a day like today because it was over 90 degrees Fahrenheit outside. And yes, I use Fahrenheit. Come at me. This courtyard is much larger. It has a ginormous patio that has a ton of space, but not many places to sit, strangely enough. However, the main point of interest in this courtyard was the main pagoda. This thing was incredible and was on suspended bridges. It had some stairs, so I had to keep picking up my suitcase. Not the end of the world, but just keep this in mind if you require accessibility features. Re-entering the terminal after that felt amazing as the temperature probably dropped about 20 degrees. A couple gates further down we see the third and final outdoor courtyard. This one's specifically for children. There's an assortment of play structures and decorations specifically geared towards children in order to help expel energy before getting on board. I do really like that, but today most kids I saw getting on flights were totally covered in sweat, leading me to wonder what's worse, an energetic kid on an airplane or a sweaty, smelly kid. The other thing I noticed when walking around the terminal was that there are a number of tech features at each gate that I wish we could have in the States. Things like facial scan boarding, of which the United States has for some airports and only for international flights. But more impressive was that as people boarded, and the system recorded people as having boarded, there was this number on the right side of the screen showing how far through the boarding process they were, so you know how close to departure the airplane is. People are also very organized here, not crowding the line the second they smell upcoming boarding, so we actually boarded in less than 30 minutes, even on my wide-body flights in China. Finally, we reached our gate for Shanghai. Interestingly enough, we were using the smaller of the airports in Shanghai as well, after coming from the smaller Chengdu Airport. Boarding was due to start soon, so in the meantime I couldn't wait to get my first look at the Comac jet that I spent 5 years anticipating. And there it was, loading up like any other aircraft and any other flight, but this time with an aircraft that is new to the world. They even had a decoration on the side denoting the world's first C919. I would learn later that this was just the beginning, as China Eastern did not take this aircraft launch lightly, which was pleasing to an avgeek. Speaking of avgeeks, there was no shortage of them here. This plane's been flying once per day for about 2 weeks at this point, and everyone had gathered to see it. Each time I looked, there was more people taking pictures. Finally, it was time to board, and I was very excited. I didn't even research the cabin layout, so I could be fully surprised when I got on board. Business class on the C919 is 2 rows, interestingly enough numbered rows 6 and 7, each in a 2-2 configuration. I previously have flown China Eastern's A320 business class on a domestic flight, so I was comparing this product to that one, and by those standards, this seat blew me away. As mentioned, the homage to being the first C919 was everywhere, starting off with the headrest cover on every seat. In addition, the pillow at each seat had the same logo as well. They then came around to pass out our pre-departure beverages, and I went with a glass of orange juice on a coaster with the same first C919 logo on it. Now looking around the seat on this aircraft, starting with the left armrest, which was home to the tray table. The tray table folds out, and as is normal these days, you could have half of it out or all the way out. Regardless, it was very sturdy, which is nice and not always a given on these armrest mounted tray tables. In front of you, on the seat back, there's only the 2 literature pockets. One hard shell pocket home to reading material, and an elastic one home to the informational material. I thought it would open just based on the look of it, but that seemed to only be a way to reach anything that may have dropped in there. There is plenty of space underneath the seats. The good thing is that there's space underneath the center console, enough to squeeze 2 bags if you needed to, so that the space directly in front of you can be used solely for legroom. On the right side is a center console where you have an armrest and a counter big enough for a couple drinks, or 1 drink and 1 hot towel holder if, like me, you're lucky and get an open seat next to you. On the bottom of the armrest, there's the 3 seat controls, 1 for recline, 1 to raise the leg rest, and 1 to extend the footrest. Under that was a cubby that was actually a fairly good size and could fit things like a laptop, a good amount of chargers, and any other personal items you brought on board. This was also where you'll find the charging port, which includes a universal charging port and a USB port. And on the front of the center console, you'll find water bottle holders, where each seat currently had 1 stocked. Above your head, you also have individual air vents and a style of light that I've never seen before, where you either have this blue accent light or the white floodlights. At each seat was a pillow and blanket. The blanket wasn't the thickest thing in the world, but it was definitely soft. The pillow was actually quite nice. It was not as flimsy as most airline pillows. It was quite nice and very plush and comfortable. As far as the items in the seatback pockets, first we have the hardshell pocket. This pocket had the reading literature. First off was the day's newspaper. It interested me that the front page's picture was in English, but the rest of the paper was in Chinese. Additionally was the airline's magazine, which included information on sites in China, but also had airline information such as their offices and their route map for both domestic and international flights. The elastic seatback pocket had some additional items. First off was the air sickness bag, which just had yet another copy of the world's first C919 logo. We were also given this little tote bag, which I really struggled to open one-handed. Once opened, you can see the China Eastern branding on the bag that is meant to be brought home. Inside that bag was also where you found the slippers that were given to each business class passenger. There were also menu cards waiting on the center console when we got to our seats, which included two sets of menus, the white menu for food and the blue menu for drinks. The food offerings were fantastic for a 2-hour domestic flight. We were using the lunch menu plus the daily special. Impressive considering if you're in first class on a route like this in the US of this length, you'll most likely get a glass of Coke and a bowl of nuts. Speaking of drinks, the drink menu also had some wonderful choices. In addition to a normal selection of soft drinks, coffees, and teas, there was also some wonderful crafted beverages, which I made sure to try. The lavatory was pretty basic and had nothing special going for it, although being a new aircraft, it was still new and shiny. The soft white surfaces also helped reflect the light, just making it feel a little bit more new and airy. By the way, I mentioned the av geeks in the terminal that were taking a bunch of pictures of the flight. That didn't stop in the terminal, as I noticed the passengers in front of me with multiple GoPros and a cell phone recording as we made our way through the flight. Now, the Comac C919 has been a definite long haul of a project. Like most things, the pandemic didn't help it, but they've been in the works for quite a while, partnering with Bombardier back in the mid-2010s in order to help it come to fruition. They also got the CFM LEAP 1C engines, which if you're unfamiliar with those, the LEAP CFM engines are similar to the ones you'll find on Boeing and Airbus. The LEAP 1A on Airbus, 1B on Boeing Maxes, and the 1C now on the Comac. They're also hoping that that C will come sequential to the ABC, so they can be grouped into that when talked about under common aircraft manufacturers. Once in the air, I decided to recline my seat. The recline actually wasn't all that bad. You can see on the seat next to me, since it was empty, this seat is fully reclined here, leaned back with the footrest up and the little foot holder down below. About 30 minutes after departure, our meal service kicked off with dried fruit and nuts along with a hot towel. For the entree, I decided to order the hot beef option as well, in addition to going with one of their signature drinks. This one was lemon mint with some soda water. Presentation was wonderful on this spicy beef shank, however the beef was a little dry. The veggies on the side were great and definitely spicy, so they lived up to their name. Luckily, that bowl of rice was there to help out with that. As always, I definitely appreciate the custom branded silverware as well, along with the custom branded World's First C919 cake to go with the meal. And you can see here, without even using the seat next to me's tray table. With my meal here, I also have space to get some work done on my laptop as well. Now, unfortunately, these new aircraft don't have any Wi-Fi on board. I don't know what these services are showing up at 35,000 feet, but none of them were the onboard Wi-Fi. You did have an in-seat charging port, however, so streaming was actually okay, considering that I was able to keep my laptop charged throughout the entire flight and also get some work done. Now, it was only about an hour and 50-minute flight, and so before long we were already beginning our descent and arrival into Shanghai. Now, my conclusions for this video are interesting because I have to compare my thoughts for China Eastern's business class, but also my thoughts on the Comac C919 individually. Now, as far as the Comac C919 goes, they're trying to compete with the world's major airlines, and the airplane is super comfortable. I could see it in the ballpark of that of the A220, where it can be used for some medium haul routes. The cabin itself is super comfortable, and it has these wonderfully big and efficient engines as well. On top of that, if we're thinking about China Eastern's business class and how they use this airplane, I think that what they've done with the cabin is fantastic. If you compare it to some of their other domestic narrow-body fleet business class like the A320, it's a complete game changer. These seats are extra comfortable, they recline in more ways than one. They have definitely enough charging ports for every passenger on board and then some, and they also have just an extra comfortable seat and bedding to go along with it. In addition, the food offerings were a lot better than what I had on the A320 on a very similar route. I'm not sure if that's because of the aircraft and the different things they had available to serve on this flight, or if it just so happened that this flight was better timing and therefore had better food options. I would love to see the Comac C919 branch out in the world, as I think that they are fairly limited if they remain inside of China. You've seen things like the Sukhoi Superjet within Russia, which was a similar type of model trying to be a short to medium haul route aircraft, but never really broke out of Russia all that much. I think that if Comac can get their plane sold around the world, especially within Europe, or of course North America, this plane could be wildly successful, and I would look forward to flying on it with such a comfortable cabin. Now, I do know China Eastern kind of rushed to get this one out on the line, as it is the world's first and the other deliveries are still a little bit farther behind. That being said, it still is flying every single day, albeit only once a day, which means that once it completes its turn from Shanghai to Chengdu and back, it parks at the hard stand where it sits overnight waiting for its next day's turn to Chengdu and back. I generally dislike these remote stands because of how long it takes to actually get to the outside world. It did still take a while, considering we couldn't get off the airplane directly into the terminal, we had to take that bus, but because it was a domestic flight, there was no immigration, so it was pretty quick once we were in the airport to actually get out to the curb, something that I don't usually do outside of America, taking domestic flights. This was also my first time at this one of Shanghai's airports. I'm used to Pudong, which is the major international airport just across the city. However, I was pleasantly surprised at the size of this airport. It was pretty nice and had mostly wide bodies at this time of day. My favorite feature about this airport, however, is that if you didn't have bags and therefore didn't have to go to baggage claim, there's a separate door immediately off to your right where you branch off rather than going down to baggage claim, which takes you on a little bridge over the rest of those passengers directly to the curb. I also appreciated having a KFC on both ends of my journey. Because they have security at each door, it was a bit of a maze and struggled a little bit to find my way out of the airport, but lo and behold, I finally made it to the curb. But with that, let me know your thoughts on China Eastern's business class, but more importantly, I want to know your thoughts on the Comac C919. What are your thoughts on this aircraft? Do you think it will be successful, and also, do you think that we will see it in North America soon? With that though, I thank each and every one of you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Safe travels.